What could this be? It could be a big blue book. Maybe it's a big blue box. The sky is often blue. Maybe it's the sky. The ocean can be blue. I think it's the ocean. Let's see what else we have to work with. Maybe these two pieces can help us. They could go on top of each other like this. Let's see, maybe they go better end to end. Maybe they can work like this. I think that will help. These could be land, a shore. One here, one here. In between these two shores is water. So much water. There's a story told about a boy who was born on one of these shores, who when he became a man took the long journey to the other shore. This boy's name is John Murray, and he lived in England into the 1700s. As a boy, John Murray dreaded Sundays. His family, led by a stern father, rose at dawn each Sunday to spend the whole day praying and attending church. After church, John's father would quiz him on the sermon. If John couldn't answer every question, his father would hit him. John's parents believed in the Calvinist idea of God, that God decided whether a person would go to heaven or hell before a person was even born, and a person could do nothing to change this. Furthermore, only a few certain people were chosen to go to heaven. People thought that if you attended church a lot, and if you worked very hard, and if you were very, very good, and if you made a good living, it could mean that God had chosen you for heaven. And that was why John's father was so strict. John tried to please his father. At the age of 6, he could read entire chapters of the Bible. He developed a talent for speaking, and, as a teenager, he was often asked to preach at nearby churches. One day, after John grew up and got married, he heard that in London a small group of people called Universalists were preaching ideas about God that were very different from the Calvinists. "John," said his wife Eliza one day, "who are these Universalists?" "I don't know," he answered, "but I hear they're evil and dangerous people." "What do they believe?" asked Eliza. "From what I hear, they believe some crazy idea that, well, every person will go to heaven because God is so good," said John. "To tell the truth, John," said Eliza, "sometimes I wonder myself why a truly good God would want millions of humans to go to hell through no fault of their own. Besides, John, is anyone really completely good?" After much thought, John and Eliza joined the Universalists, and John began to preach. He rode around from city to city, teaching people how to love each other and love God. John traveled around letting people know that God loved them and that God loved all people, and that God wasn't angry and wasn't going to punish them. But people couldn't always believe John. They would get so angry at him that they would tell him to leave their towns. But John knew his message of a loving God was reaching some people, so he continued. Then suddenly everything changed. His son died and Eliza became sick. John spent all their money and borrowed more to save her, but she died also. He stopped preaching. He was too sad, and people didn't like hearing that God loved them. John decided he wasn't going to preach anymore. He said he was going to leave his country and take the long journey to the wilderness in America. John got a job on a boat which was sailing for America. It was a long trip. Meanwhile, there was a man in America named Potter. Potter was a farmer who owned a lot of land. Potter had been having the strangest dreams. He began thinking that God was talking to him in his dreams. Mr. Potter had a dream in which God told him that he needed to build a church building on his land near the ocean, and that God would send a preacher who would come and preach from the pulpit. God also told Mr. Potter that the preacher would preach a wonderful message of love that would change people's hearts. Potter did as he was told in the dream. He built a church building, and then he waited. I wonder if the minister will ever come. I wonder who that minister is. The boat in which John Murray was sailing finally made it to America, but the water got shallow and the boat got stuck just offshore. They had been traveling for a long time and had begun to run out of food, so the captain of the ship asked John to go ashore and buy some food to bring back to the boat. John came to shore. And where was he? He was on Mr. Potter's land, and he ran into Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter met John saying the strangest thing. He said, "Today, when I saw your ship in the bay, a voice inside me seemed to say, 'There, Potter, on that ship may be the preacher you have so long expecting, who will teach about a loving God who saves all people, not a chosen few.'" John didn't know about Mr. Potter's dream, that he was to build a chapel and that a preacher would come and preach God's love. John said quickly, "I am not a preacher." "But," said Thomas Potter, leaning forward, "can you say you've never preached?" "I have preached," answered John slowly, "and I believe as you do in a loving God." "I knew it, shouted Thomas. "You are the preacher for whom I have waited for so long. You've got to preach in my church on Sunday." "No," replied John firmly. "I never want to preach again. Tomorrow, as soon as the wind changes, I will be on my way." After John went to bed, he couldn't sleep. He thought to himself as he tossed and turned, "I just wanted to get away from everything. If I preach Universalism, I know there will be trouble. Folks here in America mostly have Calvinist views. Just like in England, why start trouble for myself in this new country? But Thomas Potter has such faith in me, and he's so kind. Oh, I wish I knew what to do." By Saturday night, the wind still had not changed, and John finally agreed to preach the next morning. Thomas Potter was overjoyed. He grabbed his coat and hat and ran for the door. "I'm going to spread the word to all the neighbors. They can expect a sermon such as they have never heard before." That Sunday morning, September 30th, 1770, John Murray climbed into the pulpit and told the people there to go out and give a glimpse of God's love. Give them not hell, but hope. John didn't stay with Mr. Potter, but he did stay in America, and he did start preaching again. He founded many churches, devoting to spreading the message of love. I wonder if you have ever heard or seen any of this before. I wonder what was your favorite part of the story. I wonder what was the most important part of the story. I wonder where you might be in this story. I wonder if John was ever scared that people wouldn't like what he was telling them. I wonder if Mr. Potter ever worried that a preacher would never come. I wonder if you have ever had a dream like Mr. Potter's. I wonder what other ways God speaks to people. I wonder if Mr. Potter was happy or disappointed when the preacher finally came. I wonder if this lesson reminds you of any of our Unitarian Universalist promises. I wonder where the spirit of love and mystery could be in this story.